one of the biggest things I hear from advertisers, filmmakers, trailer houses, network promo people is they all want a signature sound for everything they're working on. And so what is that really? So I'm going to play some examples of kind of the different styles of signature sounds that you're going to hear in different sort of media, and then run through the talk. So I'm just going to rip all these off, and then we'll talk about it. So I do want to keep the logos up because a huge part of sound is the way it is married to the image itself, right? If you can close your eyes and you hear a melody, hopefully you're recalling that image in your head. So this is a noise we've all heard. It's really annoying. So these are sort of newer aspects of sound design. And so we're getting out of melody, and it's much more sort of mechanical in some ways, electronic, but also organic. It's kind of a hybrid of a lot of different things that are kind of giving you something that you're going to recognize. I really like this one because it's really, really iconic, and it's also used for dramatic effects. So it's not just about Law and Order, but it's also to hit a different scene. I'm sure we all know that sound. This is a famous station ID. It's just 3 notes, so now we're getting into melody. So we're moving out of that percussive sound, and we're moving actually into melody. Something that very few companies do, which I find really surprising, is that they don't have a melody. McDonald's does, and no matter what style of music they are playing for their commercial, they always play this hook. So it's all different genres. We just went through about 10 different genres right there, but they're all playing that same hook because you could be in your kitchen, you hear that, and you go, oh, I just heard a McDonald's ad. But very few companies do that, and I think it's so interesting. So those are all melodies that belong to them. One thing I do want to touch on is, as filmmakers, you guys know how important it is to have music, professional music, in your tracks, and how impactful music can be when paired with that. I'm not talking about source music like in the Say Anything famous scene where John Cusack's holding up a boombox where there's music playing. Like, this is just music that's playing over it. Usually a music supervisor picks something, but it can have a huge impact. Think of guys like Quentin Tarantino, Wes Anderson, where they use a lot of popular music to really tell a story. This is...
Choose life, choose the joy, choose a career, choose a family, choose a fucking big television, choose washing machines, cars, compact displays and electrical tin openers.
That's a great scene. I love that movie, Danny Boyle, and for whatever reason, every time I hear Lust for Life, I think of Ewan McGregor strung out on heroin and running down. And then finally, so we've talked about kind of percussive sound, branding, talked about melody, hooks, how popular music can work, and now the last thing is having original score. This is probably the most famous theme that's come out in a while. And the way that this synthesizer is married to the graphics of the package immediately sort of transport you into this 80s world, which we all know is what makes Stranger Things so popular. So those are just a few different examples of how you can utilize a signature sound to tell a story. So sound effects are huge for anything from your iPhone to Xbox. That's a really big way that you can do stuff. Melody, depending on what it is you're trying to sell, having a melody can be really important, especially if you are constantly replaying that melody. It creates a nice subconscious reaction for the listener and the viewer. And then songs and score can be used in different ways, like we did with the Danny Boyle example and then Stranger Things. Whether it's original music or you're grabbing something that's popular, how do you marry that into itself so that you have something that's signature? So if there's any lesson to learn from this first part, it's that having a signature sound is really sought after. Everyone in Hollywood is talking about it. So what does that mean For you, how do you find that? How do you create that? How do you emphasize that in your brand or in your project? And then if you're making stuff for clients, always be bringing that to them, saying, hey, we're going to help you find a signature sound, or we're going to help you create a signature sound so that your product stands out. One thing is a good tip: copyright your sound if it's original. And you could copyright just about anything. You'd be surprised. The sound that a Harley-Davidson engine makes is copyright. So you can't have that same sound. If you try to use it in a film, you have to get clearance from them. So if you come up with something that's really cool, own it and copyright it, because you never know. Someone might want to use that in a film or an advert, and they have to go to you and pay you a licensing fee. So make a little bit of extra money on something that you created. So I'm going to get into publishing a little bit, and this is going to be helpful to people who do want to use popular music. There are two sides to every recording. There's the master, which is the actual physical recording, and then there's the publishing, which are the music and lyrics. So you have to clear both sides. If you're doing a cover, as we hear in a lot of trailers, you're usually going to pay someone else for that master. So let's say I was covering David Bowie. I don't have to pay David Bowie for David Bowie's recording, but I do have to pay the publishing. It could be a lot of money. If you are going to be using popular music, the three things that you really need to know what you're going to use it for are the term, territory, and usage. Term, how long are you using for? Territory, where is it going to be seen? And the usage, what are you doing with it? Is it a regional ad? Is it a national trailer? Whatever. So the most common one is all media worldwide in perpetuity. I'm sure you guys have heard that before. But you just want to make sure that you know what you're licensing something for and how you're going to license it. A nice thing to keep in mind is patience and due diligence when you're working with publishers, because they take forever to get back to you, and it's a real pain to get them on the phone, but you just have to keep doing it. And if you are going to use popular music, you got to make sure that you have the correct rights done, and that's just across the board. Otherwise, it's going to cost you a fortune. Good example happened in Baby Driver, where they used a T-Rex song, and they went to Mark Bolan's son, because he is the executor of the estate, for the soundtrack. Everyone thought that he would know what all the clearance rights would be, so Sony licensed that track for the soundtrack. However, I think it was in Germany or Belgium, for whatever reason, he does not own the publishing. So they had to pay the publisher millions of dollars because the soundtrack was already out. So that publisher had them over a barrel. So just on a small level, on a large level, make sure you do your due diligence, make sure you know what you need to clear. A good tip also when you're doing this is don't be afraid to ask. Recently, I did a short film, and on the end credits, the director wanted to use a song by a group called The Kills. So we got in touch with the licensing company and their publisher, and we asked how much would it be to clear both sides, and it was $250 each for 1 year US for film festivals. I was talking to somebody, and they saw the film, and they said, oh, you can't take this to a film festival because you have this popular song playing. And I was like, of course I can, because I already cleared it. But I work in licensing, so I know that's something that I need to do. And they were really shocked that it was such a small licensing fee. So if there's a track you really want, don't be afraid to ask for it. So finally, there's a lot of resources out there for you to find your signature sound. If you do want to use popular music, there's 5 big publishers who own about 89% of the share of tracks out there, and by 2014 it was listed that they controlled over 11 million songs, which is a lot of popular music. It's pretty much everything you've heard on the radio in the last 75 years. Those big 5 are Sony ATV, Universal, Warner Chappell, Cobalt, BMG. They're all located in Los Angeles. If you want to talk to them, it takes forever, but you can do it, and if it's a popular song you want, go to them first, see what the rights are, see what the publishing is. One thing to keep in mind is when you are talking to them, you need to realize that depending on the deal with the artist, sometimes the artist can just nix it. I used to work for Foreigner, the classic rock band, and there was a cover being done for the song Hot Blooded in Latin America, but they were singing Hot Pockets. And it was a big licensing fee. It was probably going to be like $200,000, and the guy who wrote the song, who owned the publishing, who's still in the band, he was really iffy if he wanted to say yes. The song had already been written, the spot had already been created, and they were just sitting there hoping he would say yes. He finally did, but if he could have just totally nixed it, and then you're starting from scratch, and that's a lot of work being done. So if you are creating spots for somebody and you are doing a cover, or you are going to be using popular music, if you're going to bring that into the equation, think about it early, because if you think about it later, they would have been out hundreds of thousands of dollars, and then they'd have to maybe get a new song, get a new cover. It's a headache. You probably lose the spot, so don't do it. Bless you. You're welcome. So if you are into the idea of creating a sound effect brand, there are tons of audio branding companies. There's a company called Audio Brand. They're huge. They did the Xbox sound effect. They've done stuff for major sports. They've done stuff for networks. And you're going to get kind of more of that organic and percussive sound. They also can do full music. So if you want something that is an iconic sound at the end of a track, but have music playing through it, they can do that as well. If you are looking to get your music out there to be used as possibly a signature sound for somebody or just get licensed, there's tons of music licensing companies. If you just Google, you'll find a ton out there, and you can give your music to them, and then from there, they will try to place your stuff in a TV show, in a film, etc. And that can be very useful. Production music, which is where I work, usually the biggest ones are owned by the big publishers, and we will create an entire library of all original music. Some of it sounds very similar to popular music, and we are sort of the cheap version of using a track or using a big composer for a custom thing. So we do a lot of trailer music, we do a lot of trailer sound effects, but people will come to us, use our sound effects to get their signature sound in a trailer, but they can pay us a cheaper license than if they went and got it done totally custom. I work for Alibi Music. There are a ton out there, but I don't want to talk about them because they're competitors. But there's a lot of libraries out there, and all that music is theirs, and they can clear both sides. They own the publishing and they have the writing. So that's usually a safe bet. If you're kind of working on a timeline and a budget, you can go to them and know this is going to clear. It's going to be no problem. So I would just say, kind of summing up, if you familiarize yourself with how to create a signature sound, where to go, what you need to do with it, how to incorporate it into what you're doing, and then what your customers are looking for. There's a lot of resources out there to make it happen. Music is usually the last thing that people think about, and sometimes that can cost you a lot of money and a lot of time. So if you start to incorporate that thought process early, especially creating something unique and original, I think you're going to have a much better product, and it's going to save you a ton of time. Lastly, this is just as a composer as well, please don't use royalty-free music. It screws the artist. It's really cheap. It demeans our art because people pay about $50 for a music track, and I would never want to pay a filmmaker $50 to do something for me. A lot of people don't realize that creating a track takes hours and hours, and also practice, because you just have to get better at your instrument and better at your audio workstation. So if you can, I know that budgets are shrinking, but if you spend a little bit of money, you're going to get a much better product, and the artist is going to make a little bit of money. And let's say you're doing like a Downy ad, and they have back end on it, and that goes national. They're going to make really good money on the back end, which could be life-changing money for them, essentially, and it maybe costs you a few extra grand. So, all right, that's my chat. Thank you guys very much.